Hello and welcome to Recap Radio. I'm Diego Cupolo, editor-in-chief of Turkey Recap, and this is our show about Turkish politics and foreign policy. Listeners of this podcast will know Turkey's relationship with the European Union is complicated. One reason for that is the EU accession process, which officially began in 1999 and officially froze in 2018. That's when Ankara took a more assertive foreign policy and domestic politics were reeling from post-coup attempt purges. Many of the people jailed then are still in jail today, including businessman Osman Kavala and former pro-Kurdish party co-chairs Selahattin Demirtas and Figen Yüksekdağ, despite multiple rulings from the European Court of Human Rights for their immediate release. For their part, Turkish officials and public figures often blame the stalled EU process on European bias against Turkey, anti-migrant sentiments, and strong opposition from Greece and the Republic of Cyprus, who have territorial disputes and historical baggage with Ankara. In the middle of all this is Nacho Sánchez Amor, the European Parliament's rapporteur on Turkey and longtime politician from Spain. As his title suggests, Amor writes annual reports on a wide range of developments in Turkey, including rule of law, democratic rights, economic activity, and foreign relations. He's drafting the 2026 report now, so I spoke to him about recent developments in Turkey and Syria, and also broader topics like migration management and how he views the Greek and Cypriot stance in the EU-Turkey framework. One quick note, this interview was recorded on January 28th, 2 days before the ceasefire agreement between Damascus and the Kurdish-led SDF in Syria, which is why we don't reference the agreement when we discuss Syria. Okay, let's get into it. Nacho Sánchez Amor, thanks for joining us.
It's a pleasure.
So let's start with Syria. Following recent clashes in Syria, what are the EU priorities there, and how does Turkey fit into it?
Well, the EU priority has been expressed from the beginning of the change of the regime, is try to create a margin to examine the new setting of the power in Syria and to try to allow the country to exercise another kind of governance. And this is still the same situation. Regarding the situation in the north, I think first, we have to be aware of the humanitarian situation in Kobane. Because the first thing we have to be aware is the situation of the civilians. We are not talking only about militias or military personnel. We are talking about civilians being refugees in this city that needs in absolute needs of every help that could be offered by anyone, including the Syrian government. I heard about the opening of some corridors, and I really hope to have the opportunity to deliver some help to the civilians in the city. Regarding the clashes, I think it's unhappily during the 1 year there was no apparently possibilities to implement the agreement on the last March, and this is a worrying situation because if you don't have an agreement, you are coming back to the previous stage. That means to compete for the territory, and this is again to clash, and this is again to put this part of the country under duress and not having found the means. Both parts, and I don't want to blame one or another, but it's an obligation to every interlocutor regarding the north of Syria to find a way to live together and to encounter the legal means to do so. We are very worried about the news regarding the release of some ISIS prisoners, even if the information is blurring, it's not clear about who is to blame for this situation. But this is very concerned. This is a big concern for the European Union and for the rest of the world, the releasing of these ISIS fighters.
Yeah, and we're coming on the 10-year anniversary of the EU migration deal with Turkey. And obviously, instability in Syria is a big part of security concerns in Turkey and also in Europe. Just to review a little, that migration deal in 2016 started with 6 billion euros and then another 3 billion allocated to Turkey to stop irregular migration and also improve the living conditions of refugees and asylum seekers in Turkey. Now that these clashes are happening we're also having many discussions in European countries and elsewhere about reassessing Syria as a safe return country. Considering that there's instability again, how do you view EU cooperation with Turkey on migration, and what do you make of these discussions about Syria being a safe country for return for refugees?
Well, let's start with Syria. I think it's early. I think it's early to know if it's a different situation than the civil war, meaning the civil war was affecting the whole country. There were people fleeing the country from every corner of the country. And this is a more concentrated, isolated situation. And for that reason, I think we have to wait to assess any change related to the status of Syria regarding migration. On the general terms of the migration deal with Turkey, I always defended that the migration has been the most functional part of the relation with Turkey. For sure, it's transactional. For sure, they could be criticized, saying as part of the left said in Europe, you are externalizing your border and that kind of things. But at the same time, we did an effort with Turkey. First, Turkey has a very complicated situation, having this enormous amount of people in need. And this is the thing we have to recognize. Second, it's not true this idea that sometimes we heard about, we are putting money in the pockets of Erdogan, that kind of rationale. European Union is spending money for the needs of the refugees, mainly via NGOs, United Nations agencies. Some of the part of the money has been spent via Turkish authorities, because if you want to build a health center, it can be a health center isolated from the network of the health centers of the country. But I think we did very well, both parts, creating this framework. It's true that the framework has not been functional in the other side of the returns and the returns from Greece and so on. But regarding the situation of the refugees, Syrian refugees mainly, inside Turkey, I think it has been functional. It's functioned. We spent money. The European Parliament always was ready to approve and to pass any extension of the funding, because the problem is still there. Now the things are becoming better in Syria, at least in the most part of the country, and this idea of allowing to go to the Syria and to come back is a good idea, because that means every Syrian citizen can assess if there are conditions to come back with the family. Maybe it has been used for young males or young men to examine in which condition are my village, in which condition is my former house, and I see this is a rational way to do. What we, from the very beginning, we were strongly against was this idea that was expressed in Turkey about creating big cities in the north and sending the people not being not having roots in this part of the country to, let's say, to colonize the north of the country. I think the return has to be in the condition of the United Nations, but the decision has to be the decision of the Syrian refugees, and to go wherever in the country they consider normally their own former villages or cities, they can reconstruct this life. This is not an operation of, let's say, engineering the delicate ethnic patchwork in the north of Syria. This is a way to allow everyone to decide when they have conditions to return with the family to Syria, normally to the places they had to live some years ago.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Let's shift to domestic Turkish politics. We spoke last when you were in Ankara this December. You were on a reporting trip. During that trip, you met government officials, opposition politicians, civil society. You also met with high-profile jailed political figures like Ekrem İmamoğlu, Selahattin Demirtas, Osman Kavala. You're currently working on the 2026 report for Turkey. Can you give us a preview of what we can expect in that report on domestic politics in Turkey?
Well, I'm afraid regarding the core of the report, that is the accession process and the conditions of democracy in Turkey. Happily, there are no good news, because the trend has been exactly the same for the last year, and then we need to assess in the same way the lack of good news relating everything. Because listen, I thought really 1 year ago that the Turkish authorities, they were to rethinking, for example, the Qayyum policy. It didn't happen. It didn't happen in this environment of the peace process. And for that reason, there are more people put in jail than Fatih Altay and many others. There are normal, not prominent journalists to be prosecuted. The pressure on the civil society is exactly the same. New detentions on the southeast. There are no good news. Even, I insist, even in this environment of the peace process running, apparently the move were only from the side of the PKK and Öcalan, and the government and the parliament. I know they are working in the resolutions, but I need to fuel the peace process and to offer a proof of sincerity. The government has to do something. I don't know exactly what. I can recommend one way or another, but I think the process really needs a gesture from the power to be fueled, to be sustained. And what we need from the point of view of democracy, democratic backsliding, no good news. And for that reason, what happened lately, again, the diploma case with Imamoglu and many others, is a kind of reconfirming blatantly the authoritarian trend and the authoritarian way. And for that reason, inevitably, regarding the core of the report, that is a state of human rights and rule of law and democracy, the depiction is as it is, and that means there are apparently difficult conditions to think about resuming the accession process, even if, I have to say, it's important to say, I received some inputs from Demirtas and from Imamoglu that the European Union needs to think if reopening the accession talks could be useful to create some leverage on the government. I'm sure I'm taking into account these opinions, but my initial guess, without starting my negotiation with the other groups, is difficult to say that there are improvements regarding rule of law and that kind of things. And for that reason, this part of the report is going to be similar to the others. On the other side, there is the other part of the relation, the partnership. As you know, I have been more open in many aspects of the partnership. I think we can count with Turkey in security and defense. We need to talk, to continue talking about migration. We are favorable to start talking about the custom unions. We are perfectly okay with the visa liberalization if the government decided finally to send to the parliament some reforms that are lacking to meet the conditions of having visa liberalization. The parliament always defend to resume the high-level talks. It's a little bit cynical. I have a debate this morning with the foreign minister of Cyprus in the parliament, and I said that it's cynical to say we don't have a high-level talks, but everybody is coming to Ankara to talk, meaning the commissioners, the president of the commission, everybody is talking to Turkey in the highest level, but we maintain the idea that we don't have a high-level talks. Why not to resume the high-level talks? And this is the thing we always request from the Council in my report. Meaning no progress in democracy means no progress in accessions, and a more diverse pictures in the other parts of the relation. But I have to say, my main request to the European Union is to be vocal on democracy and domestic situation in Turkey. This is a big thing that I have to tackle with in my report. The silence of the Commission regarding the domestic issues, the silence of the Council, the silence of the Member States is damaging the trust in the European Union, even in the pro-European, pro-democratic society in Turkey. And this is a big gap. And it can be only myself as a rapporteur or only the Parliament defending the civil society, defending the prisoners, defending the political parties in the opposition. Is tiring and continue doing, but I would like to have other voices from the European Union pointing that there is a problem with a neighbor and with a partner, and not hiding and not simply avoiding any kind of criticism. I always said that having been and being very critical with Turkey, I always encounter a very kind answer from the authorities, and I have been able to meet everyone there, and I always have been well received, and that means something, meaning we can't dismiss the fact that the Turkish authorities and the Turkish state even is meeting with a very critical person like myself, but that means there is a way to meet with the Turkish authorities without avoiding the more difficult issues that we have. And what I'm asking to the Commission and the High Representative and the External Service is to engage with Turkey also in the other part of the agenda related to human rights and rule of law. As you say in Turkey, it's there is a say that I would like to recall is dost aci söyler, meaning your friends sometimes they have to say to you plainly the things they think about yourself or about the relation. Then I take this say as a motto. Dost aci söyler.
Thank you for that. I'm wondering, especially if you can help me understand how EU officials that are dealing with Turkey from different states, different bodies in the government, how they balance what you're describing here, because accession is a criteria-based process. At the same time, there's urgent security needs, there's migration, there's the Ukraine-Russia war, there's also the supply chain considerations. Are Turkish domestic politics getting pushed aside in the moment of greater urgency for the cooperation on the defense and security?
No, it's on the contrary. And this is a risk to be assessed by Turkey. As I said, when the more you are depicted and treated as a partner, the less you are treated as a candidate country. Meaning, I talked to the new ambassador in Ankara, to the new ambassador to the European Union. Ambassador, be very careful. You are going to receive many people saying, you are an excellent, important partner. Imply, but forget about it. My position is as follows. There are no conditions to advance in the accession process, but we have to deal with Turkey as a neighbor and as a partner in many other parts of the relation, hoping for a change of policy regarding the domestic reforms. What I try to explain to the public opinion in Turkey, and sometimes it's difficult to compete with the enormous amount of speakers that the palace has in the media, that the accession process and the membership of the European Union is about democracy, is not about geopolitical. Now, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Fidan, came out with this idea lately, a couple of days ago, about no, the European Union is not interested in Turkey because they are conducting a kind of identity policy. It's not true. The problems about the membership are not related to the religion or identity. We have 25 million Muslims in Europe. And we never question if Spain is as Catholic as it was some centuries ago. Meaning, religion is not a factor. Could be others, but I never heard in my tenure as a rapporteur a lot of discussion about we have a problem with Turkey because religions or because identity or because history. No. Nobody needs to talk about religions when in the first stage of the question is the democracy. Maybe if there is a real change in the country, and it's becoming more reformist and more close to democratic standard, maybe that kind of rationale could appear. But now nobody needs to talk about identity because simply there is no conditions to advance because democracy. And then to say to the public opinion, no, the European Union is approaching Turkey with an identity approach is not true. It's simply not true. The question and the difficulty is related to democracy. And only when this first barrier is overcome is when other rationale could appear. I don't deny there are many extreme right parties in the European Union and the European Parliament with Islamophobic agenda. It's true, but this is not the government, this is not the majority of the parliament, this is not the stance of the external service, and this is not the position of the commission. Meaning, it's true there are some Islamophobic trends in European politics, but in any way, any government or European institution has expressed never that the problem with, in the last 20 years at least, that the problem with Turkey is about identity. Meaning, let's be clear. Let's play the game fairly. If there is no advance in democratic standards, it's not needed to talk about accession. Then let's work hardly. Let's plow on in the other part of the agenda, meaning visa liberalization, security, defense, migration, custom unions, whatever other parts of the relation.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And last question. Many times people are talking about the Greek and Cypriot vote blocking Turkey-EU cooperation on different agendas and different files. How do you view Greek and Cypriot stances, and what do you think must be done to remove roadblocks for more cooperation between EU and Turkey?
Listen, we had this very morning session with the Foreign Affairs Minister of Cyprus and the Deputy Minister of European Affairs, and what I noticed, not only in the paper, in the program of the presidency, look, when there is a few mentions of Turkey in the program of the Cypriot presidency, but they say Turkey is a candidate country. This is a different position than Ursula von der Leyen, that she always forgets that Turkey is a candidate country. No, the Cypriots said clearly Turkey is a candidate country. Even they didn't mention in the program the fact that the accession process is in a standstill. They have been very objective and very kind not to mention this part of the thing. Turkey is a candidate country, and they didn't mention the fact that the accession process is completely stalled. And this is a thing to take into account. Of course, they are representing the European Union. To be president of the Council is not a bilateral thing, and I think they convey to the Turkish authorities some invitations to come to some gatherings in the scope of the Cypriot presidency. But at the end, we have a big difference. Is the core of the problem. Our position is to stand for the United Nations framework, and the late position of the Turkish president is the two-state solution. This is a big problem, and then we have to be realistic. Maybe we can encounter some imaginative way to deal with custom unions, but some gestures from Turkey has to be expected, because if not, the current political framework in the relation, it's stated in the Council conclusions on April 24, is related to Turkey. It's related to Cyprus, sorry. And then we have to have some progress, and I think to accept these invitations, to have meetings not with Cyprus, with the European Union in Cyprus, it could be a gesture that could be very well considered. And I think the stance of President Erdogan with the new president of the Turkish community in Cyprus, it was very, very clever. It's contrary to Mr. Baceli, I think President Erdogan understood the things better, and now the fact that the new ruler of the community is more moderate, more open to some kind of diplomatic solution is a good stance. For the rest, we have a lot of quarrels, and we have to recognize. But to recognize means let's deal with the issues, as the country, your country, is doing with Greece. Meaning there are problems, but at the end you come to the way. I noticed there was a meeting with the deputy minister recently, Turkey and Greece. Okay, let's deal, let's talk, let's use the diplomatic tools, and let's not cut the talks, and let's maintain some bridges, even if we know and we recognize, and we have to be clear that there are big differences between the parties.
Thank you very much for your time, Nacho Sánchez Amor.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. Thank you for counting on me.
To wrap, that was Nacho Sánchez Amor, the European Parliament's rapporteur on Turkey and longtime politician from Spain. This podcast is a production of Turkey Recap, a newsletter on Turkish politics, foreign policy, and business. If you like what you heard, visit turkeyrecap.com for more coverage. Turkish language readers and listeners can also follow our political coverage at studiorecap.com. We invite feedback, send us suggestions or questions by email at info@turkeyrecap.com. Stay well, stay safe, and see you next time.